both physically present and viewing this event through our digital platforms. This is a very, very special event on a very special day. I'm Emeka Akabogo. I am the coordinator of the CPI Oil and Gas Law Forum. So obviously I'm a lawyer, maritime lawyer, and I'm very happy to anchor this event today and bid you very, very warm welcome. So to proceed very speedily to the commencement of today's session, it is my special privilege to invite, to make a very warm welcome to all of us, the chief host of today's event, who is none other than someone who is an industry statesman, a veteran across virtually all sectors of the oil and gas spectrum in Nigeria, who will very soon be joining the octogenarians and who has a very special place in CPI. That's the chairman of the CPI board, former group managing director of NPDC, Chief Chamberlain Oyibo.
On behalf of the Board of Governors and all the members of the Center for Petroleum Information, CPI, it is my pleasure and privilege to warmly welcome you to the celebration of our 20th anniversary and the formal presentation of our book, Energy Insight Nigeria. Today's event, which is part in person and part virtual, is very much in accordance with the spirit of CPI's vision, creating value through knowledge and network. CPI is an educational hydrocarbon-specific non-profit organization established to pool expert knowledge and share value-added information for the benefit of its members and industry. CPI was registered on 12th December, year 2000, and therefore turns 20 years this year, 2020. The idea of forming an organization that can harness the vast knowledge and experience available in the industry was initiated by Victor Eremosele. A mixture of professionals, some retired and some still in service, in both the public and private sectors, got together and appointed the first board of governors to run the affairs of the center. All chief executives of major oil and gas companies, both public and private, when duly informed of the formation of the CPI, participated or supported our programs in one way or the other. The membership is primarily made up of professionals and practitioners in the oil and gas industry, like engineers, geologists, bankers, lawyers, and administrators. The addition of the Oil and Gas Law Forum and the Energy Finance Group led to an increase in the membership of lawyers, bankers, and other finance experts and professionals. CPI's activities covered all the areas of the industry, such as exploration, production, refining, transportation, maintenance, the environment, relationship management of host communities, legal, finance, regulations, and policy. I want to take this opportunity to express the gratitude of the board and membership of the CPI to all those who have contributed in many and varied ways to the success of the CPI in these 20 years. There is no better way to celebrate these years of action-filled activities than by writing our anniversary book, Energy Insight Nigeria, which we are presenting formally at this occasion. This book compiles large resource material which we have accumulated over the past 20 years. It is a highly recommended read for all practitioners in the oil and gas industry, as each author is virtually the final word in their area of specialization. We say a big thank you to all those who contributed to the making of this book and all those who made its publication possible. CPI now sets its sight on the future, its future, and the future of the oil and gas industry. The future of the failure of the government to pass the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, after almost 20 years of the announcement of its intent, has not helped the country in achieving its objectives of managing and utilizing its oil and gas resources optimally. By the time the bill is finally passed, the world would have started looking beyond hydrocarbons to other sources of energy. Therefore, the country must look forward to an energy policy that is comprehensive and set to utilize its other abundant resources, especially renewables. The discourse and programs of the CPI will need to be more comprehensive to include the judicious and profitable utilization and management of the different sources of energy. We expect more people who can think out of the box to join the CPI in order to keep it relevant. Going forward, mentoring the next generation of energy professionals will be prioritized. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I welcome you to this 20th anniversary celebration and formal presentation of the energy inside Nigeria. Thank you.
And we are pleased that we are able to proceed quickly into the next item, as we have our guest speaker for today here with us. The topic is Salvaging the Unrealized Nigerian Vision 2020. And this topic, as broad as it is, particularly with reference to the oil and gas industry, is best taken by someone who best captures the dynamics of the Nigerian oil and gas industry by virtue of his positioning and experience. Mr. Gbenga Oyebode is the chairman of Alukan Oyebode, which is one of Nigeria's biggest law firms. He's been a past chairman of the section of business law and sits and has sat on the boards of several blue chip companies with experience gathered and insights accrued over the years. And it is my pleasure to welcome him to present the keynote address for today's session. Mr. Oyebode.
So I thought that when Victor asked me to speak on this, salvaging Nigeria's unrealized Vision 2020, I thought it was important that the discussion focused on a wide array of impact of the different development plans of the country, whether it's a Vision 2010 or a Vision 2020, why we haven't achieved any of our objectives, and why it's particularly important at a time like this to review those elements, and essentially, as part of that review, arrive at a conclusion that would give us food for thought about development plans, about the future, and about the Project Nigeria. But before I start on that, first I do need to congratulate the leadership of CPI. I think it's particularly important that after 20 years, and those of us in the room, I'm sure remember when Victor did this as a briefcase project. He was in gainful employment, but he still persevered. He pushed an agenda. The agenda was for the benefit of all of us. We learned from his academic exploits. We learned from the conclusions of the different conferences that he organized. And I think it's particularly important that today we celebrate the perseverance of the leadership. And more importantly, not just the perseverance of the leadership, but more importantly, the achievements of the CPI. I think that for me, to the board of CPI, I think that's particularly important, especially since we see lots of things that start and stop in our society. So 20 years is not something that I would like to take lightly. The way I wanted to do the talk this morning was really to set some timelines and some perspectives. And inherent in those timelines and perspectives gives us an ability to understand why we are where we are. So let me put life in a little bit of perspective. First, to say that development plans and goals and targets are not unusual to us. In actual fact, a lot of us in the room will understand that some of the great developments of Nigeria, whether they be the Kainji Dam, Eko Bridge, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway in those days, were the product of planning. Howbeit that it was military regimes that encapsulated this planning. So you will remember that we had the first National Development Plan, it was 62 to 68. The second National Development Plan was 1970 to 74. The third was 75 to 80. And the fourth, the last time that actually we sat back and planned from a perspective of a long-term plan was 1981 to 85. That was the fourth National Development Plan. And I say this only because when you look back at some of the infrastructure development of the country, they are actually based on planning that was conceived in the development plans. That's the history that we remember. And that's the history that actually, if you look back and you say prior to 1979, 1980, all of the things that you saw were actually based on plans that the Nigerian civil service, the Nigerian governments at that time had put in place. And I think it's important to just put that mark on the ground. We like talking about the very first attempt at what we would say is a vision plan was the Vision 2010. Vision 2010, if you remember, was captured by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. At that time, an idea of Chief Ernest Shonekan was passed on through to the Sani Abacha government and was launched in 1996. So that was the Vision 2010. Lofty goals, lofty ideas, but we'll get to that. I think the other thing that I thought we should talk about was, so how did we get to Vision 2020? That was a product of the Obasanjo administration, essentially handed over to the Yar'Adua government. Very, very lofty ideas. Again, I will review those targets as we go along. But I think what's more important here, and I don't want to get to the conclusion before we've established things, but the reality for a lot of these plans and these vision plans, particularly the vision plans, was that we could actually celebrate them more because the targets were not met. I think that's what is important. That's why we say we're trying to salvage unrealized dreams. That essentially is what we're dealing with here. So let me hit a couple of items such that we understand what is important here. So in the Vision 2020, they talked about what was supposedly, what was the target GDP growth rate that we should have in Nigeria? They said it was 10%. Vision 2020 said it was 13.8%. The reality is that we've only ever done slightly over 6% in the heady days of the Obasanjo government, especially when crude oil prices were significantly higher than they are today. But what's the current growth rate, if we could even just hazard a guess? The reality is that 2 days ago, the World Bank and the IMF told us that we weren't actually growing, but that this year's projections would be negative 4.3%. And I think it's important to put that again in perspective. That's what you're looking at today. So not only are we not growing, actually things are tightening and getting worse. Power generation in 2010 was that government would increase spending on power. Vision 2020 said we were targeting 35,000 megawatts of generation. The reality today is that there is captive power of maybe 13,000 megawatts. We're actually only doing 5,000 of power into the grid. So you can see what the significant distortions are from a vision plan that said 35,000 megawatts, but from a real actual delivery today of only 5,000. The other thing that I thought was important, because we talk about it so much, was corruption ranking. So Vision 2020 said we would be in the top 40 of countries. Well, top 40 meant that we would have done so well that we would have almost eradicated corruption. Well, the reality today is that the same people who set up the index say that out of a total of 180 countries, we're number 146. So again, shows you that even on something that we complain a lot about, we haven't achieved those objectives. The other one that concerns all of us in this room is that we always try to, the Nigerian oil industry, every time there's a strategic plan, tells you about how much reserves, that we must increase reserves. And we always like to think that it's easy to increase reserves. It shouldn't be, it's not nuclear science. It's not sending a rocket to the moon. It's actually something that we've been doing for the last 60 years, and we've done it particularly well. On the understanding that if we are trying to increase production, then we must be finding more reserves. So we set a target of 40 billion barrels of reserves, and we said we should be producing 4 million barrels. Well, the reality is that, as you know, we're nowhere near that today, for many reasons. Same reasons that we're going to discuss around salvaging unrealized dreams. The reality today is that we're way below the 40 billion barrels of reserves, and definitely are nowhere near the 4 million barrels of production. So that shows you that those targets haven't been achieved. One of the things that's been achieved is that, at least in the Vision 2020, was that we said we'd have a local content bill. So that's in place. We also said we'd have PIB. Well, PIB is still a work in progress. So it's important for us to look at that. I usually like, at this point, talking about what are the good things that have happened where we've met some of the targets. And I think it's important, statistics helps to put life in perspective. Particularly, and let me talk about the telecoms industry today, where you went from 400,000 fixed lines in the year 2000, and today there are 189 million cell phones in Nigeria. So that's a massive leap of faith. And from an industry that didn't exist 20 years ago, in real terms, didn't exist at all, that industry today is 10% of GDP. So that's a massive, massive growth, where an industry in 20 years becomes so significant that not only does it produce 10% of GDP, but actually produces significantly more if we add on the whole ecosystem. So I think that's important. But I think it's also important to lay over what are our concerns. And the reality is that our concerns are, if you don't grow, where population growth is 3% year on year, number one, where it's been predicted that we're 200 million people today, but in 20 years, so just think of it that there are people in this room that will be around in 20 years. That in 20 years, there are going to be 400 million people that live in our country. The city of Lagos is 20 million today, will be 40 million in 20 years. So inherent in some of the indices that we talk about now is the fact that if we don't achieve those objectives that we've set, then in actual fact, not only will we not see growth, we'll actually be receding, because we would have doubled population size and we will not be producing enough. There's always been a discussion around, do those population figures, are they true? Sometimes I like using the statistics that says that they are true from one perspective. Even if you take the mobile telephony numbers at approximately 190 million subscribers, and even if you took and you said we halve them, the reality is that even in halving those numbers, it means that there are 90 million subs. Let's assume that all of us carry 2 phones. So inherent in some of that, we see some significant progress. But I think just to overlay 2 things that I wanted us to just look at very quickly. There are 40 million BVNs as of today. That means that there are 40 million identifiers of unique identifiers for the banking population. But the figure that should disappoint us more is that there are only 9 million pension fund contributors. So the assumption is that there are only 9 million of us in what we call a formal economy. The rest are outside the formal economy. And so some of those things are the things that lead us to believe that we're not doing as well as we should be doing. So let me talk about how do we salvage this, because the reality for me is not just talking about, I think all of us recognize what the gaps are. So I think it's important for us to understand how do we salvage the deficit, particularly on the infrastructure side, and then what do we prefer for the answers to some of these problems. So just to put life in a bit of perspective, power, for one, is one of our big challenges. So South Africa has a third of our population, but produces 50,000 megawatts. And by the way, for those of you that may go to South Africa regularly, because they haven't replaced generating capacity or haven't increased generating capacity recently, they are load shedding. But guess what? At 35,000 megawatts of real power into the grid, compare that with 5,000 megawatts of power that we put in the grid today. And those are the gaps that I see that I think we should be talking about. I think on the transportation side, we're seeing significant investment in rail, and I think that's commendable. On the healthcare side, I think what the pandemic has taught us is the rather poor state of our healthcare infrastructure, and I think that's important for us to rebuild. I think one of the other things that is the problems that we see is the inability of government and the private sector to partner for national development. So to the extent, and I use the telecom sector as a sector that partnership, quote and unquote, has worked. But it's more driven by private capital. And I think that's the distinction on that side. I think it's also important to recognize that there must be political will to stick by some of these reform targets that we've set for ourselves in our vision plans. Let me talk about macroeconomic decisions. And I think the key one here is how our foreign exchange policy is managed solely based on the oil industry provides 80 to 90% of total foreign currency earnings. And to the extent that that market declines, then what we see happen is what we're seeing today. The other thing that I think is important, and I think it's, I just want to drop the issue here. I hope that as part of the deliberations of CPI, that we will have a session on it one day. But the reality is that if we constantly create a situation where our friends, the people who stood with us for 60 years, who invested in the development of the Nigerian oil industry, if we chase them away, which, by the way, we are doing today through oil industry bills that are actually counterintuitive, royalty rates that make no sense, taxes that do not allow for foreign investors to make decisions sitting in their boardrooms and take a 20-year view, laws that say that taxes will be recalculated every couple of years, so you can't actually make an economic decision as to how much you will invest in Nigeria. Not recognizing that there are other destinations for this capital that we're seeing being deployed. And so when we make those decisions and we don't see an investment, a corresponding investment, then we need to understand that an economic case for an investment in Nigeria is becoming few and far between. And I think for those of us that are well-meaning, we should allow conversations to be had around laws that actually will prevent further investment. And actually, not just that those laws prevent foreign investment, those laws will also prevent for even indigenous investors to be able to make a business case for investing in the country. So these are particularly important things. So what's the way forward? The way forward is collaboration. The way forward for me is alignment. I think there needs to be strategic engagement with the private sector. I use private sector now to mean all private capital, be it foreign capital or local capital. I think there needs to be significant investment in infrastructure. We need to remove administrative bottlenecks. These administrative bottlenecks may appear today to be targeted at foreign investors. But to make my point, I think once you target investors, whatever color those investors are, what you're doing is it's a chilling effect on investment, whether it is loan capital or debt capital or equity capital. I think it's also important that we must have coherent macroeconomic policies that we can explain, policies that are not knee-jerk. We shouldn't have the inconsistencies of banning and unbanning. We need to understand that there is a value chain that needs to deliver manufacturing, and these value chains don't happen overnight. So we cannot allow for knee-jerk reactions to problems. Those problems exist, but we must plan to set them aside. But more importantly, I think there should be fiscal discipline. I think fiscal discipline, particularly on the side of government, we shouldn't borrow so much that we are spending significant portions of budget to service loans, where we're spending significant portions of budget to pay salaries, where the capital part of a budget is so reduced that we recognize that not much will happen. And it's important that we don't continue to add debt upon existing debt that we have. So I think that the cliche global practice, best global practice, and I say it's a cliche, but one of the reasons why it works is that it's been done before all over the world. So whether it's in Vietnam or in Malaysia or in Indonesia, think of, most of the things that we're talking about, there's a template for them. And that's why we call them global best practice. And I think it's important that we put in place processes for adoption of global best practice, because it makes no sense to try and recreate the wheel when some of these things have been done in other countries. Finally, I think one of the key things that we should look at is energy policy. So hydrocarbons, as good as they are, and we need to understand, for some of us that worked on projects, LNG projects 10 to 15 years ago, new projects that should have delivered the equivalent of NLNG several times over, but we didn't do the right things on time, we didn't sign the agreements when we should have signed them, we negotiated from a position of strength. We wake up today and we still only have one LNG plant in the country when we should have had 3. And so we do need to understand that while it looks good to keep hydrocarbons in the ground on the basis that we own it, the value of it may decrease over a lifetime. And the point I make here is around all over the world, governments are moving from hydrocarbon-fueled cars to cars that, we're going to get very soon to cars that just move just because you think about them moving. And I think it's important. And if you look at what the pandemic has done to us and has done to production and use of hydrocarbons around the world, actually we're all getting on with business as usual. Production, refinery, storage capacity, vessels moving has all halved in real terms. So I think it's important that electric cars are the future all over the world. All over the world. So we need to rethink the whole strategy around hydrocarbon exploration, production, and use in a world where most of it in our market is used to fuel our cars. And so from that perspective, it's important that as part of our long-term planning, we should understand that the oil industry, while it remains a key element of foreign currency earnings, remains a small element of jobs creation, and that we must focus on jobs, because jobs will be the only way that we're going to survive in Nigeria. And finally, I think it's important, and I say this not because I think foreign investors are the only people who can invest in a country, but I say it only because we need our friends with us all the time. And if you, to just use something that you may have picked up in the news yesterday. So a little company called Paystack, that's less than 10 years old, is a fintech company, actually rolled out 5 years ago, put a pipeline in place for payments, was bought by a significant fintech company out of the Silicon Valley yesterday for $200 million. That's the way of the world. So somebody did an analysis as to how you could have bought 3 or 4 Nigerian banks and rolled them into one, and it still wouldn't be $200 million. And I'm sure most of you sitting in this room don't even know that there's a company called Paystack that exists. But that's the way of the world. So really, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think that we can realize the Nigerian vision. It's going to have to be a collaborative effort. All of us have to work at it. Government has to work with the private sector. We must put policies in place and be consistent with those policies. We must not assume that people that come from outside our shores have come to steal our resources, because they also have options as to where to go. But we must put policies in place that encourage investors, not just foreign investors, but also Nigerian investors, to stay the course and to continue to do good work. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga Oyebode, for a sweeping review of what the potentials are for Nigeria and the need for implementation of visioning. Fiscal discipline, collaborations, key drivers which we need to focus on. I think it would be very appropriate to give him a round of applause once again. We had to go into that guest speaker's presentation because we were still awaiting the arrival of the chairman for today's event, who arrived in the course of the presentation. The chairman of today's event is Chief Tunde Afolabi, who is the chairman of Amni International Petroleum, which he founded in 1993. And prior to that, he had worked in several segments across the oil industry, Texaco, Mobil in the United States and across the world. So we're pleased to have him as our chairman today. And he will have 10 minutes to make to give us his address for today, before we go into the discussion of the presentation which has been made by Mr. Gbenga Oyebode. So it's my pleasure to invite Chief Tunde Afolabi.
I stand on all protocols that I'm sure you know have been established before I got here. So I blame the person who started if he had not taken care of everybody. So let me congratulate my elder brother, Chief Chamberlain Oyibo, who I met in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1974. When, ironically, you will not believe that he and I worked together at Texaco for his tireless efforts in husbanding and nurturing this project to what it is today. And I think, it's a collective effort. So please, an applause for Chief Oyibo. Also, my thanks to him and his board of governors at the center for the honor of extending to me to chair this very special and auspicious October occasion. It is amazing how time flies. I still remember quite vividly the late Rosemary Onwoka, who ran the CPI Secretariat, I think from 2002, frequently calling and literally chasing us to promptly remit AMNI's CPI subscriptions. As a young body at the time with the noble vision of creating value through knowledge and network, we felt obligated supporting CPI to grow. Having been a participant in its numerous seminars and symposia, I can confirm that not only are the resource persons top-notch, like you just heard from Chief Oyebode, but the well-chosen subjects covered were and are always topical and relevant. The center has chosen today to mark both its 20th anniversary and the presentation of a book of readings, Energy Insight, Nigeria, Evolutionary 2 Decades in Retrospect, which is 440 pages, I heard, documents the petroleum and energy industry. Editor, Dr. Professor Victor Heromoseli, who doubles as the CPI Executive Director, Board Secretary, tells me that each of the 30 chapters represents a presentation made in course of the last 20 years by some of the brightest minds in the country at a CPI knowledge sharing event. The editor says that CPI has such a large repository of information that it was difficult selecting material for the authoritative reference work. He had to convert 16 other presentations to abstracted one-page commentaries that dot the book. I have over the years known Victor very well in several places where we should not be describing here. This is his third book, I believe, and also he was CFO and industry finance guru, but his versatility, intellectualism, and gift of expression have been uniquely put to good use for the benefit of the country and industry. Indeed, my path and his, he wrote this one, so do frequently cross at the annual International Petroleum, I was going to say it, IP Week in London, organized by the Energy Institute, of which he is a fellow. No doubt, a broad variety of readers at home and abroad will find the book extremely useful in unraveling the numerous issues confronting our energy industry, be it oil, gas, or power. For a small gathering constrained by COVID-19 protocols, and I was supposed to be on Zoom today, but I decided that I cannot miss all these beautiful faces here today, so I said I should come in person. Thanks to Zoom, we have several dignitaries who will be recognized in due course. However, let me acknowledge the presence of today's, when they get here, Chief Books Launcher, Dr. ABC Ojako, and I don't know whether it's been represented here or not. The guest speaker, who has already given this paper, which is very thought-provoking. I don't know whether you to call Benga chief or doctor or professor, all of the above. Benga Oyebode, who I've known for almost 30 years now, and he has not gained an ounce since I know him. He's just been running around though. It's not because there's not enough to eat at home. He has not been able to sit down in one particular place. All the proud members of the Board of Governors of the Center for PIC must deservedly be congratulated. All of you. If you are here, please stand up and be recognized. CPI, sorry. Kudos to you all. Not just for institutional staying power, but for thoughtfully leaving a worthy legacy through a documentation that covers both the last 2 decades and takes a peep at the next 2. Before I round this up, all right, I'm not sure whether it's on your schedule of top topics, but the paper given by Gwenga Oyebode needs to be addressed today. I think there are some issues there that, you know, as a presenter, we can just, you know, gloss over it because of our time constraint. I don't know whether it's 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes that we should take his paper and discuss it, because this is the future of Nigeria, and if we don't work together, we are not going to get there. So thank you once again for the opportunity to chair this occasion, and wishing you all a very successful event. Thank you.
We'll take some questions or comments on the presentation by Mr. Oyebode immediately. So I'd like to hand the microphone over to the chairman, and if you have any question or comments, make it within 1 minute.
To borrow money, you have to have money, all right? And to grow Nigeria to where we want to get to, you need to be able to let go some of the investment you are sitting on that is doing you no good, all right? Saudi Arabia just raised, I don't remember how many, $60 billion or whatever it was, to go into infrastructural development that will take them beyond their oil years, all right? So we have, I don't know, $100 billion that we can translate from 5% of the oil resources we have today. If we put 5% of our reserves on the market today, we can raise $100 billion. Most of you will not agree with me because they say you give the money to the minister to spend it. Okay. But let's just assume that it's used judiciously, all right? Just imagine what we can do in building our infrastructure to other industries, all right? Oil and gas, we are okay. But to build the infrastructure, you need railroad, you need link roads, you need power, you need, all right? Without us doing it, nobody else is going to come here and do for us, okay? So I'd like to start with that. And Austin, I'm sorry.
Just a 1 minute comment on Gwenga Oyebode's paper. I'll summarize my view on his entire paper by saying that over the past 60 years, or specifically really over the past, I'll start from 1967 when the military took over, because I think you can situate most of our problems with intervention of the military. So in that 53 years we have seen since 1967, government has run away from policy formulation and productive regulation and concentrated on funding economic activities. That's why we're where we are. The only time in 2000 that government decided to let go of its monopoly of the telecom sector, you can see what your numbers show to us. When those licenses were given out in 2000, NITEL also had a license. I haven't seen a line from NITEL. That explains why from independence to 2000, we had only 400,000 NITEL lines. If we left NITEL alone, we'd probably have 450,000 lines today. Government has insisted on its monopoly of the refining sector It has taken a businessman who has a balance sheet size in his other businesses to be able to raise money and try to build a refinery. The reason nobody has built a refinery, people say, why are you asking government to privatize? Go and build your own. You can't build a refinery where your only competitor is a government monopoly. Nobody will give you money to. The only reason Dangote is building one is that he doesn't need project financing for that refinery. He's borrowing money on the basis of his cement balance sheet. Otherwise, nobody would have penetrated the refining sector. When that refinery is built and a few others, 10, 15,000 barrels per day in the next 3 years, the 453,000 barrel government refineries will die, the same way United died. Nobody will buy them for a couple, they will be worthless, they won't be worth the land on which they're situated. You talked about power. Yes, you encourage the private sector to borrow money and come into generation and distribution. Constrain them by policy in your tariff, constrain them in the transmission, which you control as government. So you talk about 13,000 megawatts available capacity, only 4,000 is in the grid. Again, government policy and regulation failure, not the private sector. If you left power unconstrained, the way you left telecoms industrial constrained, we'll be distributing 15,000 megawatts today. Rail. Amechi tells us he's building rail lines. The British built those rail lines 100 years ago. There's nothing new he's doing, building rail lines or repairing the ones that are there. Let them put the trains on the tracks and let's see how they run in the next 10 years. That's what a rail system is. It's not building the tracks and borrowing money from Chinese to build the tracks. So again, we are failing a sector that we should have proper private sector injection. And GE was ready to do this for us. We fumbled with all the policies and we're spending good money that should go into education, healthcare, and security. Building rail lines that will not work the same way Nigerian Railways hasn't worked. Nigerian Railways failed not because there were no rail tracks. So Amechi cannot impress me by whatever rail lines he's building. We're just doing what they failed woefully in doing 60 years ago. Healthcare. Last week I went on a tour of this Evercare that is at the junction of it's a 165-bed hospital. If you go in there and it is wrong, well, and I think it will be, it's private sector driven, $80 million was pumped in there. If you have 5 of those in this country, half of the people who fly outside the country for Medicare will stay here. Again, private sector driven. On the contrary, you have the National Health Center in Abuja that they probably spent a lot more money building. I hear that there's no X-ray machine that works there.
The next session, and if any other comments arise, we'll make that open in the course of the event. The very next thing which we have to do is to do the book presentation to do the book review. The book review is to be done by an intellectual colossus We'll proceed very quickly and go into the next session. And if any other comments arise, we'll make that open in the course of the event. The very next thing which we have to do is to do the book presentation to do the book review. The book review is to be done by an intellectual colossus in the oil and gas industry, Dr. Suala Ariweriokuma, who has been active in the public sector, just recently retired from NPDC, and whose book has been described as a compelling insight into the Nigerian oil and gas industry and a must-read by the University of Edinburgh. He is eminently qualified to review this book today, and let us make him very welcome with a round of applause.
My name is Suala Ariweriokuma, and I'm pleased to be here. All the comments that have been made so far are heartwarming, and as I review the book, you will see the reason why they are. and why the efforts of the pioneers stand out very clearly. Obviously, we are here to support CPI in celebrating its 20th anniversary. And available records show that this institute or organization was established in December 2000 for the primary purpose of creating value through knowledge and network. This is part of his vision. And I must say that this is a carefully crafted vision which is premised on knowledge. And knowledge, from knowledge, you derive all the good things of life. We are talking about power, we are talking about reserves and all. All this can only be brought into manifestation only if knowledge exists. And the fact that a group of people found it necessary to promote this intangible, valuable entity, knowledge, is rather gratifying, and it's something that we need to commend. You agree that through knowledge, you derive innovation. And from innovation, you can derive entrepreneurship and enterprise. And when the skills from entrepreneurship are deployed, you inevitably create value. Going further, they have the word network, which is to say that they value the idea of interaction between people in positions of authority in a particular industry such as the oil and gas. And they also recognize the fact that through networking and interaction, you create hybrid ideas which also drive innovation. 20 years of existence is a significant milestone in the life of any organization. I would say that in the oil and gas industry, 20 years is an important time frame for evaluating the viability of key capital-intensive projects. For most projects that are subjected to economic analysis, 20 years is often a time frame that they work on. To say the least, Nigerian LNG and the refineries were subjected to that process prior to execution. And of course, for most of you in the industry, you're familiar that oil mining leases are generally granted on installments of 20 years and sometimes in 30 years, thereby highlighting the importance of the number 20. The execution of those projects were premised on the assumption that there would be adequate feedstock to support the plant for 20 years or more. In this context, I join your numerous affiliates to say congratulations on this august occasion of the 20th anniversary. And I must say that I'm honored to be chosen to review the book Energy Insight, Evolutionary 2 Decades in Retrospect. If you look at the title of the book, Energy Insight, Evolutionary 2 Decades in Retrospect, I find it rather intriguing, and it also creates curiosity. The title portends intrigue, thereby warranting a careful deconstruction. For you to really understand, you have to deconstruct it to acquire deeper understanding of the meaning. The configuration of the title suggests a nexus or link between the keywords energy, insight, and the Nigerian sovereign territory. Nigeria is richly endowed with natural resources, and energy features at the centerpiece of the pool of natural resources. The energy journey of the country spans over a century, and most of us are familiar with that story, 1908 being the starting point. The exploration programs of the pioneer companies were interrupted after they were started in 1908 by World Wars I and II. First in 1914 and later in 1939. This notwithstanding, Shell, DRC, rejuvenated the search process and struck oil in a remote community in Oloibiri in 1956. I call it remote because for most of us present here, even if you were to be given a premium to visit Oloibiri, you would be very reluctant to go there. And that is where the hidden treasures are placed. And often you find that these treasures are placed in areas of the weakest people, be it in Nigeria or in the Amazon region. These are people with very little means in those regions. And of course, oil production started on a very modest note with 5,100 barrels per day in 1958. And the first cargo was shipped in 1958. Production commenced at 1,500 barrels, and in 1958, the first cargo of oil was exported to Europe. And that event, I must say, brought joy, expectation, and high hopes. That's for Nigerians. But our detractors were not quite enthused that oil had been found and that the first cargo had been taken to Europe. And this is what they had to say, and I quote, "The first export from Port Harcourt will be no more than test shipment to enable the properties of Nigerian oil to be evaluated in refineries in Europe. They do not mean that production from Oloibiri and Apam is thought to be commercially attractive." That was their comment several years ago. Despite the pessimism, oil production increased and reached 2.4 million barrels in 2006 from 5,100 barrels. Oil brought fortune to Nigeria and degradation to the Niger Delta region. Between 1956 and 2005, Nigeria earned approximately $461 billion from oil. And at the same time, 3.0 billion standard cubic feet of gas was flared daily. And this singular act, emission, brought about 90 million tons of carbon dioxide being emitted into the atmosphere annually in the Niger Delta. The deplorable practice on the part of the IOCs was mitigated through the establishment of the Nigeria LNG, which utilizes 4.8 billion standard cubic feet of gas as feedstock. And it has succeeded in monetizing the gas, and as between 1999, when the first cargo was exported, and 2018, Nigeria LNG had accumulated well over $90 billion in revenues. The federal government out of this has earned not less than 16 billion US dollars as dividend. In this context, you say that Nigeria has without doubt attained an elite status among global oil and gas producers. It commands respect in OPEC and has had the rare honor of leading the organization as President and Secretary General, respectively. These observations indicate that the Nigerian sovereign space is indeed greatly endowed with oil and gas resources, which could last for several decades. The oil and gas industry is replete with robust activities in the upstream, midstream, and downstream sectors. These activities, without doubt, present a rich harvest of events which create a suitable medium for retrospective insight. Insight provides a valuable opportunity to capture the sequence of events which, upon further articulation, present an accurate, indelible addition to the hydrocarbon history of the country. The deconstruction of the intriguing title of the book and the validation of the link between the keywords energy insight, Nigeria, set the stage for systematic review of the book. The book we have before us comprises 30 chapters arranged into 7 thematic segments as follows. Number 1, global perspective. Next is energy policy and legal structure. 3, exploration and production. Number 4, gas and power. 5, downstream. 6, energy finance. And 7, low carbon future. These are the thematic segments of the book. The theme, global perspective, commences with a narrative which focuses on performance measurement as a criterion for sustainable achievements in national oil companies. The performance of NOCs of Saudi Arabia, Norway, and Brazil were highlighted as potential benchmarks against which NNPC or other NOCs in Africa can be measured. One of the contributors of the segment, based on KPMG studies, identified 4 key criteria which predicate the emergence of sustainable performance in NOCs as follows. 1, achievement of government economic goals. It's one of the criteria. Proper definition of NOC role within a well-articulated vision. Next, high-level autonomy, public accountability, and transparency. A clearly defined strategies to drive improved operational performance. Among these 4, you find that the third, which talks about high-level autonomy, public accountability, and transparency. These are key factors that have eluded government public organizations, such as NNPC. The NLNG did not fall prey to this arrangement because of the partners that are involved in it. But you find out that of all the agencies of government, high level of autonomy has never been there. Accountability has also been a problem, and transparency is a big issue. The achievement of government economic goals translates into the maximization of revenues of the state. And this is the key thing that government wants. They want the organizations such as NNPC to be a source of good income for government. On the other hand, role definition through assessment entails the evaluation of reserves, capabilities, financial capacity, and good governance. It is further posited that high level of autonomy and accountability derive from diversified financing base and robust governance standards. That is also a problem for most of our public organizations such as the NNPC. Good governance has been an issue, and their source of finance is very narrow. High sustainable performance requires well-defined strategies as well as supportive people and corporate culture. In this context, organizational performance of Saudi Arabia ranks high and stands out as a I'm surprised. Time flies. Okay, I know what to do to you. Okay. So the next section talks about ET, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. That has been a major issue. The Niger Delta has been a victim of that, and a lot of agitation in the Niger Delta. But we're not alone. Even in Brazil, even in the Amazon rainforest, you find that Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, all of them have this issue. Their environments are being plundered, and not much is coming to the natives. Next section talks about youth restlessness in the Niger Delta. And this has been a recurrent issue which has attracted the attention of government and several measures have been taken, but they've not been undertaken in such a way that will really bring good results. The NDDC that was established to take care of that problem has been fraught with mismanagement, political intervention by lawmakers, and when you hear stories of one single lawmaker taking 100 contracts on behalf of his people, it tells you that it's a very funny arrangement. But I think what needs to be done in the case of the Niger Delta is for the oil companies to really understand the psychology of the region and ensure that they show greater empathy and understanding in handling the issues in the Niger Delta region. And the things that they ask for, are not out of the sky. Basic things like electricity, good roads, healthcare, scholarships, and all. And these are things that they must really clearly identify as essential and necessary for them to effectively work in that region. The book talks about Nigerian content, and we are told that it has gone from 5% to 10% to 30% in 2019. And then in the area of exploration and production, one of the contributors said that in 2001, we had 27 billion. In 2030, we had 207. In 2007, we had 30 billion. And currently, we have as on record as 37 billion being the national reserve. And of course, the idea of keeping a high reserve is essential because that is the basis on which quota is allocated. And unless we have that level of reserve, we will not have a reasonable quota. Next segment that I want to talk about, perhaps just mention that LNG has been a very good business in the gas monetization process. In fact, LNG has made Nigeria proud, and it has put our name on the global map far and beyond our own imagination. And their earnings have been good. Their plants, operational levels are high because of the partners that we have, which is to say that if we collaborate with others in running even these refineries that we have, we will probably would have been having good results. Now, one area that I want to talk about very quickly before I go to talk about the achievements of the center is this carbon future. This is something that most people in the oil and gas industry should take very seriously. Carbon emission has been very high. Globally, we have about 36 billion tons of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. Globally, 36 billion, that's a lot. And out of this, the US, which has refused to identify with the climate group, emits 15.2 billion. Nigeria emits 82 million tons annually. And China, 6.6. So it is a big problem. But in talking about the carbon future, you have a dual challenge. There are two challenges. And in fact, these are, you want to solve one, and you fall victim to the other. The duality of the problem is the fact that globally, the United Nations wants everybody to have access to energy by 2030. And if you have to do that, it means you need to produce more energy so that people have access to it. And if you produce more energy, you emit more carbon. And in fact, that process has been stated to be capable of producing additional 10% carbon into the atmosphere. There will be an increase of 10%. And on the other hand, you have environmentalists that are agitating that you must cut down carbon emission and that there must be a rapid access to that to cut down carbon emission. Therefore, you have this challenge. You want to increase energy for more people to have access to it because at the average level, about 80% of countries in the world consume, most of the people in that population consume about 100 gigajoules of energy. 100. And as long as you are consuming 100 gigajoules of energy, you are just in an impoverished area. You cannot benefit. You cannot grow. For you to experience some level of prosperity, you must consume more than 100 gigajoules, 200, 1,000, 2,000 of that scale. But 2/3 of the world is consuming less than 100 gigajoules. So what is advocated is for that number to go up so that people can have more access to energy and experience the good life. Electric cars was also mentioned, and it's also part of the low energy process. Tesla, Ford, and Porsche are poised to do that, to bring about electric cars. Having said that, let me just comment on the CPI, and I want to read that portion out. It is fair to assume that CPI has encountered turbulence at various times in its 20-year journey. It takes commitment, resilience, and discipline to sustain the tempo of activities of the center, especially in times of lean resources. The meticulous preservation of the papers presented over 20 years for publication into a book confirms CPI's vision of promoting knowledge for value creation. The members of the board, the management team, corporate organizations, and all supporters deserve high commendation for an excellent job in piloting the affairs of the center. The Energy Insight Nigeria Evolutionary 2 Decades in retrospect is rich in content and should therefore be a suitable handbook for all key players in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Having successfully navigated the hydrocarbon terrain for 2 decades, it is important to ensure that CPI sails for another 20 years. This calls for re-injection of new energy and ideas into the institution. The CPI has achieved 20 years of existence on an excellent note. All chieftains of the industry, professionals, and affiliates are hereby encouraged to continue to support the center in its quest to promote knowledge and create tangible value in the Nigerian economy. I must say that this book, Energy Insight, which they're about to present, is very rich. I've read it, and the names attached to the chapters are authoritarian, high authority, level of authority in the industry. They are highly knowledgeable people, and it must be taken by people or in the industry for the benefit of their various organizations, because the challenges ahead of us are quite high, and unless we read, we may not benefit. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the time.
As I said earlier, Dr. Swala Ariweriokuma is an intellectual colossus in the Nigerian oil and gas industry and is able to hold us spellbound for the entire day. So we're very grateful to him for the insights which he has provided into the Energy Insight Nigeria. We do appreciate him with another round of applause, please. Doctor, time flies when you're making great points. Mr. Chairman, if we may proceed into the book presentation proper. The chief presenter for today is Dr. ABC Ojiako, who's the chairman of CEPLAT. At this time, he is not yet in the room. I don't know whether the chairman will have a few comments to make on the presentation of the book before we announce the pre-orders which we have. Prior to today, the CPI had made an announcement requesting people who are interested in the book to pre-order. And interestingly, in one of the rare incidents which you have in publishing, the CPI has received more than 70% subscription of the printed copies as at today through various pre-orders, all of which we cannot mention. Thank you very much. A round of applause is very, very useful. 70% of the books which have been ordered are already sold. And just in no particular order, I've been requested to indicate some of the pre-orders which have been made. And some of the pre-orders include those which are of between 30 and 100 copies each. And these are, in no particular order, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, Nigeria LNG Limited, Niger Delta Exploration and Production, the Sahara Group, South Atlantic Petroleum Company, First Hydrocarbon Nigeria. These organizations have ordered 30 to 100 copies of the book already. Also having ordered copies of the book, 5 to 10 pre-orders, are Africa Capital Alliance, BEL&EL Engineering Limited, Emadep Energy Services, Investment One FS Limited, Wando PLC, Firmus Limited, GM Ibru & Co. We've also have some others who have made various range of orders which we are not able to list fully at this time. This is just to give you an indication of the level of interest which this book has elicited in the industry. So going forward very, very quickly, we have the insight into this book to be given by, so the books which are remaining are still available for pre-order for those who are interested. And whether you are here or you are watching online, you may still pre-order. And the pre-order may be done by contacting the CPI Secretariat for those who are digitally engaged. For those who are within the room, we do have slips for pre-order, which will be circulated shortly if you don't yet have it. And for those who don't have it, just raise your hands and slips will be circulated for your pre-order to be taken. At this point, I'd like to invite no other than the engine room behind CPI, who is a former CFO of Nigeria LNG. He was a unique public servant of very uncommon intellectual stock, full of unbridled passion and full of zest. As I said, he's the engine room of the CPI and the editor of the Energy Insights Nigeria. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Victor Eromosele.
The chairman of the occasion said, standing on existing protocol. And the chief host said, we wait for Victor Eromosele to state the protocol. So now I have no other choice than to actually go through the protocols. I will not stand on existing, we will go through the protocol. So, event chairman, Chief Tunde Afolabi, MFR. Chief host and chairman, CPI Board of Governors, Chief Chamberlain Oyibo, FNMGS. Distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Benga Oyebode, MFR. The erudite, as we've seen him, book presenter and author of Political Economy of Oil and Gas in Africa, Dr. Swala Ariweri-Yakuma. Representative of the GMD, representative of MD Nigeria LNG, who should have been present, but because of the safety rule, is watching online. Special guests here present and online, representative of sister organizations, EI Nigeria, NGA, SPE Nigeria Council, NMGS is present here, and NAPI. Representatives of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and the Institute of Directors who are online, and a member of both bodies. Members of the CPI Board of Governors here present and online. Distinguished contributors to the work here present and online. Members of the Center for Petroleum Information. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen. With the permission of the chair, I will try to read my speech, well, with some style, if you don't mind. I wrote here, wow, I can today heave a sigh of relief. This day that looked so far away finally arrived. Those who have been parents know all about EDD, expected date or date of delivery. And 9 months, and you equally know about the 9 months preceding that date. The pain of pregnancy is usually overtaken by the joy of childbirth. COVID-19 babies, the lockdown babies. Our lockdown babies this time is called Energy Insight Nigeria. Evolutionary 2 decades in retrospect. Talking about pleasure reminds us of the interesting definition of the word by the brilliant 17th century English jurist and scholar John Selden. In his words, pleasure is nothing else but the intermission of pain, the enjoying of something I am in great trouble for till I have it. Joy and pleasure are too often preceded by pain and great trouble. That's what's actually fair description for the experience this editor went through in the past 6 months. The project not only compelled long sitting, but ensured the acquisition of a new office chair, complete with a lumbar pillow. Many thanks to my wife for 39 years, Mrs. Roslyn A. Ramoselli here present, whose warm massage of an aching lower back kept me going. Thank you for expressing your gratitude. Although I'm an author of 2 of the 30 chapters in the book and wrote one of the 16 special commentaries, in publishing tradition, I'm simply nothing else but the humble editor. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, let me quote from my preface in the book. The work of turning our CPS information repository into useful knowledge goes beyond a regular editor's job. It involves mining, sorting, rewriting, sequencing, updating, researching, ensuring enduring relevance into the future with a broad range of readers in mind. As one of the country's busiest oil and gas or energy think tanks, the Center for Petroleum Information is typically host to more than 22 lectures each year. Courtesy of the book, we now have a good answer to our members and curious seminar participants who often ask, where are the policymakers? Why are they not here to listen to all these quality presentations? From now on, in the comfort of their homes, like our friends online, and offices, many of such ones who may have missed out from the live events may now catch up with the thoughts, not of 1 expert, not of 2 experts, not of 10 experts, not of 20 experts, not of 30 experts, not like the Bible of 40 inspired writers, but of 45 authors. Please give them a round of applause. CPI is fortunate and proud to have some of the brightest minds in its fold and as resource persons over the past 22 decades. Contributors to this work have centuries, I mean it, I didn't say decades. I, for example, have 34 years experience in the oil and gas industry, working for people. Now I've got my freedom, including the freedom to speak and the freedom to write. And in retirement, I'm exercising that. So you can imagine when we say 45 writers, even if you divided by half of my experience and multiply by 45, you have a good number. So indeed, centuries of experience are behind everybody who has participated in this very noble project. With the permission of the chairman, I will, at this point, rapidly read out the names of contributors in alphabetical order. Can I have a copy of the book now? First of all, for those who haven't seen the book, may I show you a copy of the book? Are you ready to see it? Live copy, not the ones you see here. Here it is. Energy Insight Nigeria, Evolutionary 2 Decades in Retrospect. In conclusion, a successful atlas will say, the winning of a fiercely competitive race only marks what? The beginning of preparation for the next. Ladies and gentlemen, the race is on. We look forward to more milestones ahead for CPI. Join me in responding to the following. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, hip, hip. Hip, 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 hip. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Dr. BC Ojako, I had to specifically speak to him to even find out what happened. His apologies. He's out of Lagos in a funeral and delegated somebody to represent him. And that person set out 3 hours before time and out of just Nikon town and couldn't make it. When it was obvious wouldn't make it, then decided to find a way to go back. He's still on the way back home. Hasn't made it back home, but he's online on her phone, Dr. Chairman Wachuku, who is head of external affairs in CEPLAT. So I haven't spoken to both of them. I've been authorized to then very quickly speak on behalf of Dr. BC Ojako, chairman of CEPLAT. And he's presenting this book to the public by ordering 10 copies for the library of CEPLAT for 2 million naira. Thank you very much. Yes. So that's it. That's my announcement on behalf of Dr. BC Ojako. Again, his apologies. His emissary is somewhere on the way. Back home, haven't not made it here thanks to the ESAs. Thank you.
Permit me to stand on the existing protocol as established by Mr. Victor Herman Sele. My MD, Mr. Mansour Sambo, was supposed to deliver the address for the Group Managing Director of NNPC, Mr. Mele Kolokiari. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, I have been designated to deliver his speech. I quote, "Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great pleasure to be here with you today for the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the Center for Petroleum Information, CPI, marked by a public presentation of the book titled Energy Insight, Evolutionary 2 Decades in Retrospect. On behalf of the management and staff of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, I extend my heartfelt congratulations to CPI on this anniversary, and I wish the center many more decades of impactful existence. The NNPC is proud to be associated with CPI, and the reasons the corporation legally took up a corporate member status in the center many years ago. It has been said that the raison d'etre of the justification for the existence for the most think tanks is to serve as important catalyst for ideas and actions. As a corporate member of CPI, NNPC is proud to affirm that the center has been living to its billing. The book, Energy Inside Nigeria, is another major stride in this endeavor. Even a cursory glance through the table of contents of the book will throw up such incisive chapters as Egbuji's thoughts on petroleum product pricing and the subsidy issue. We can all attest to the timeliness of the discourse. Also those of Victor Erumosele on financing oil and gas mega projects, with lessons taken from the NLNG and many more worthwhile topics. Madam Obi Ekwesili's paper on why publishing promotes extractive industry transparency is a well worthy of particular mention. As you may know, the present leadership of NNPC is working to entrench transparency, accountability, and performance excellence, widely identified by the acronym TAPE, as the building blocks upon which the corporation proudly stands as a national oil company, and publishing our activities as being one of the most essential fulcrums of TAPE. For a while, this was almost limited to the publications of the corporation's monthly financial and operations reports. However, about 4 months ago, NNPC made history in its rebirth as a fully transparent organization with the publication of its 2018 audited accounts on the corporation's website, with the 2019 to follow suit. As a result of this and other activities to entrench transparency and accountability in its operations, NNPC was recently recognized as a partner organization of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. It is our commitment to continue in this vein and sustain all the positive developments within the corporation. Looking back at the past 2 decades of the energy industry in Nigeria, one cannot deny that as an industry, we have our work cut out for us. Nevertheless, we also should rise in celebration of the many laudable strides that have been made, strides that have been difficult to imagine 2 decades ago. Today, we are at the cusp of milestone in the history of the Nigerian petroleum industry. With the ongoing deliberations of the Petroleum Industry Bill and its impending passage into law, the face of the industry is expected to undergo a radical change. NNPC is poised to take advantage of the opportunities that will be presented by the new bill. However, it cannot do this alone. The corporation counts on the support of CPI, as well as other stakeholders in the industry, as we all work together to move the entire industry through the present challenges into a brighter future. Once again, accept my heartfelt congratulations to the Center for Petroleum Information on its 2 decades of existence. I thank you all for your kind attention. Mele Kolo Kiari, Group Managing Director, NNPC.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fatai Williams, for that commendation to CPI and the support also given. The next is Niger Delta Exploration and Production, represented by Dr. Lai Fatano.
On a day like this, I don't think I can say enough, not just for the industry, but also for the country. Simply because if you take our business, the business of E&P, if you take it out of the Nigerian story, it will be a very, very dull affair. The past 20 years had been quite formidable. It will even be more so. It had been a privilege to be part of the journey and story of our industry and that of CPI. Our company, Niger Delta Group, would like to thank CPI. Our common bond was the identity of late Chief Harriet Adams, and it will continue to remain indelible. This book is a testament of this connection. Therefore, allow me to say it will be a treasure bank of knowledge, contribution, and it's going to be so for a very, very long time to come. Its capture of our history must be the light of our future. Again, I say congratulations for this piece of work, particularly to each and everyone that has contributed to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatono, for that concise but very important contribution. The next is the Sahara Group, Mr. Tope Shonubi, who is represented here by Maria Luciano Gabriel.
Thank you very much. I'm Maria Luciano Gabriel. I'm standing in for my CEO, Mr. Tope Shonubi. Permit me to stand on existing protocols established. Firstly, I'd like to say a very, very big congratulations to CPI on the 20 years anniversary. Being a company that has weathered the storm in the energy industry for close to 25 years, we know that sustaining anything here for over 20 years is no small feat. So congratulations once again. Not only have you sustained the CPI for 20 years, but you have remained relevant and have grown steadily, which you can tell just by the crop of people, the crop of industry leaders present here today. Despite the protests, despite the pandemics, we're all here to celebrate this great achievement. Congratulations once again. The launch of this book, The Energy Inside Nigeria, is obviously just one more feather in your already highly decorated CPI cap, and we applaud you for putting this together and pulling together the kind of knowledge powerhouse that you did to bring this book to us. Congratulations from the Sahara Group once again.
Very quickly, we go to speeches on behalf of the contributors to the book. And as Mr. Mosele has listed, there are 45 of them. So we'll only be able to do 1 minute if we can, but not more than 2. And we'll start with Mr. Austin Avuru.
Thank you. It's a thing of pride to be associated with this book compilation. This is the second time that Mr. Romosela has invited me to contribute to a compilation like this. Several years ago, he did the Nigerian petroleum industry a handbook, to which we all contributed. It's a reference book up to this day. This is an even bigger and much more important reference book for the industry that people are going to find very useful around the world. And so on behalf of contributors, I would say congratulations to the CPI and to say thank you very much, Victor, for giving us the opportunity to make this book a reality. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Avuru. Next is Mrs. Tariye Badegesin. Badegesin. Sorry about that.
Again, I would like to congratulate the CPI Forum for their outstanding contributions over the last 20 years. I don't know how much I can add to what the other speakers have said, and I apologize for the repetition. However, in times of excellence, we can all agree that repetition is an acceptable form of flattery. I would like to extend an immense thank you to the editor and the CPI Institute for documenting history, the present landscape, and the potential solutions for the future of the energy sector in Nigeria. This book provides a blueprint from the perspective of Nigerian professionals across the energy spectrum and across the functional spectrum, bringing together experts in the fields of finance, law, operation, and it's indeed invaluable. 2020 is an inflection point for the world from many perspectives: health, inequality, and most importantly, energy. As we move out of the mainstream fossil fuel era into a low-carbon future, Nigeria is in a unique position to transform the sector for energy transition that will work for Nigeria. Many years from now, we will turn to this book as a piece of literary work which sits upon the pinnacle of our collective mountain, bringing a panoramic view of the past, the present, and the future of what energy should look like for Nigeria and for Africa. It was indeed an honor to have been able to share some thoughts through the chapter on strategy for a low-carbon world. Nonetheless, the leaders here today who championed the thought leaders to bring us together, encourage us to write, to speak, and to share our experiences, they must be given all the credit for doing such a great service to preserve knowledge, present a living solution space for the sector, which is crucial for Nigeria and indeed for the world. Congratulations again. Thank you.
So I'll stand on all existing protocols. I will start by congratulating the board of the CPI and the executive secretary, Mr. Victor Eremosele, on this special occasion of the celebration of the 20th anniversary of CPI and the launch of the book Energy Inside Nigeria. I will also specially congratulate Chief Chambers Uibo, who is also my chairman in of the board of another organization, for his visionary leadership of the organization. Altogether, having worked closely with CPI, I've seen firsthand the passion, tenacity, and dedication of the board members and the executive secretary to the cause and growth of the center. No doubt, the success of CPI so far reflects the hard work and the unwavering commitment to excellence of the board members and the executive team. When he sent the draft to me to review, I struggled to find a comment or two to send back to him. As you know, we lawyers, we love to review and edit documents. In the end, I had to accept that there was nothing to add, and to think that he did this not only for my own paper, but for several other papers is really amazing. Let's put our hands together for him again. I would like to really commend and salute him for a great work and for putting this excellent book together. As the saying goes, ideas rule the world, and CPI has been very active over the last 20 years in developing, promoting, and disseminating ideas for the positive transformation of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. I very heartily wish the board and the members of CPI a very wonderful anniversary and a celebration of many more laudable milestones ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biobaku. Finally, we have Mr. Folabi Oladele, who is the deputy chairman of CPI and is joining us via the link. Mr. Oladele, if you are available, unmute yourself so that we can hear you.
Abagana, at another forum organized by Business Day, looking at what happened with the NLNG and what are the things we can learn as a nation. He said something very important, stating that it was important for Nigeria and the people to move from a sharing mindset to a building mindset, from self-interest to collective interest. And that in a way speaks to the question that Professor Morogwe put on the chat. And it's something that we all need to think about as we look at the future of CPI over the next 20 years. The second point that I would make center around the comments from BEL&EL Oyebode, our chief speaker, Tunde Apolabi, the chairman, and Austin Avuru. And they emphasize the point that a goal without a plan is simply a wish. A plan unexecuted is nothing more than documented regret. And this is what's ahead for us, both at CPI, as we continue our public advocacy on the key issues that have been outlined in many of the comments that have been made today. I will end by just acknowledging all the members of the CPI, many of whom present physically or also online, the members of the Board of Governors or Trustees of the CPI.
I'm going to activate my iPad. That's what it's going to use it.
The Board of Trustees of the CPI and our support base that has been drawn from the NNPC, the OPTS, the IPPG, and the long list of all the industry supporters, both from the legal and the financial world. We need to stay together as we look forward to the next 20 years. I want to say congratulations and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oladele, for that contribution. Just before I hand over the mic to the chairman for his closing remarks, let me just read out the contribution referenced by Mr. Oladele, made by Professor Omoregbe online. And in her contribution, she was commenting on Mr. Oyebode's recommendation. She says, Gbenga Oyebode's recommended political will to drive macroeconomic decisions, consistency on policy to encourage local and foreign investment. How do technocrats activate, energize, and reverberate that political will to achieve the desired goals, objectives? Mr. Chairman, you may want to have this in mind as you make your closing comments. Thank you very much. Before we're almost at the end of today's event, and the next thing for us to do now is to cut the CPI 20th anniversary cake and take photographs. After which, we'll have a toast to the Center for Petroleum Information. So, happy 20th anniversary to CPI. Happy 20th anniversary. And to all the gentlemen and ladies of CPI, cheers. Thank you very much, Mr. Imomo, for that wonderful toast. Thank you very much. Cheers, cheers, cheers.
Now, announce lunch and tell people to go back to their seats.
So lunch is ready. We may go inside.
We are marking our 20th anniversary, so we're glad that we're 20 years old, and we are now of age, as it were. When you're over 18, you say you're of age, so I think CPI is of age, and that's part of the reason why we're here. And we're here to mark it with this book. It's a very special 440-page book that in 7 sections documents the energy industry in Nigeria. And it looks back 20 years and it looks forward another 20 years. So it's a very current book, and we urge academics, anybody who really is interested in the industry, policymakers in particular who haven't had opportunity to attend our various seminars. This is something that I think they must attend. They must read. If they read, they will obviously get insight, and we can all move Nigeria forward.
I'm the chairman of the Board of Governors of CPI from foundation to now for 20 years. I'm former group managing director of an NPDC.
As a Center for Petroleum Information, coming up with a book today to mark its 20th anniversary. Tell us particularly, sir, what are those key elements in that book that will be of essence to the development of the petroleum sector in Nigeria?
You see, for the past 20 years, almost every year we've had about 22 lectures. So we've compiled them, and it goes from exploration, production, maintenance, refining, transportation, finance, law, host community management, environment. So everything that the industry does has been discussed one time or the other in our programs. And that's why we summarize into this book. So it's something that we think will be very useful to the industry, to practitioners, both experienced and new people.